The bookstore was quiet for a Thursday evening, the air scented with paper and coffee. I wandered in unannounced, as I often did, enjoying the rare moments when I wasn't recognized immediately. These small pockets of anonymity had become precious since my autobiography hit the bestsellers list 3 weeks ago. It was strange seeing my face plastered across the window display, my story marketed like some kind of business gospel. From Nothing to Empire stood prominently featured under the Leadership and Legacy section, its gold-embossed title gleaming under the track lighting. My publicist had fought for that placement, not biography, James. Leadership, that's where the serious readers shop. I ran my fingers along the spines of competing titles, wondering which authors had actually written their own words and which had dictated them to ghostwriters between board meetings. Mine had been a mix of late-night typing sessions and recorded conversations that my editors somehow shaped into coherent prose. The results surprised even me, a narrative that transformed my stumbling, often desperate climb from community college dropout to tech billionaire into something that sounded almost heroic. The store was nearly empty. A couple browsed travel guides near the front, an older man with half-moon glasses flipped through a cookbook, and a barista wiped down the small cafe counter. I breathed in the scent of books, that particular mix of paper, ink, and possibility that even digital disruption couldn't quite eliminate. These places were becoming rare, like record stores or video rental shops. I'd bought this very chain 2 years ago when it faced bankruptcy, not because it made business sense, but because I couldn't bear to see another bookstore disappear. That's when I saw him, a boy, no older than 10, sitting cross-legged on the floor in the far corner with a large hardcover open in his lap. His hair was dark, messy, and he looked far too serious for his age. Something in his posture caught my attention. The careful way he turned each page, the slight furrow of concentration on his brow. I moved closer, pretending to browse nearby shelves, and recognized the cover resting on his small knees. My book, my story, in the hands of a child who couldn't possibly understand the business strategies and market insights that filled its pages. Curiosity got the better of me. I approached slowly, crouching beside him with the casual smile and practiced charm that had won over investors and interviewers alike. "Heavy reading for someone your age," I said lightly. The boy didn't startle at my presence. He merely looked up, his expression unreadable. "I'm almost done," he replied, his voice clear and confident. Something about him tugged at me, though I couldn't place it. Maybe it was just the novelty of seeing a kid his age reading instead of staring at a screen. "What did you think of it?" I asked, taking out the pen I always carried for impromptu signings, already slipping into the persona that public recognition demanded. I was ready for the wide-eyed realization, the stammered request for an autograph that usually followed. "Would you like me to sign it for you?" But he didn't smile. He didn't even blink. He looked me dead in the eye with a gaze so direct it felt like a physical force. "A chapter is missing, sir." My pen paused mid-signature, hovering over the title page where I'd opened the book without waiting for permission. "Missing," I repeated, feeling strangely off balance. "I'm pretty sure it's all there. I wrote it myself." The boy closed the book carefully, keeping his finger between the pages to mark his spot. Then he dropped the words that broke something deep in my chest. "You forgot the part where you abandoned me." For a moment, the bookstore seemed to tilt. The ambient music faded, and all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. I looked more closely at his face, really looked, and something ancient and visceral turned over in my gut. Recognition, unwelcome and undeniable, crawled up my spine. I started, then stopped, my throat suddenly dry. "I don't understand what you mean." The boy's eyes never left mine. They were calm, determined, nothing like what you'd expect from a child. "I think you do," he said quietly. "James Harrington." He said my name like he was testing it out, like he'd practiced it but never spoken it aloud until now. I felt exposed, caught in a moment I'd never prepared for. All my media training, all my crisis management experience, every careful script I'd crafted for difficult situations, none of it had readied me for this. The buzz of my phone in my pocket startled me. My assistant, probably wondering why I'd missed the conference call scheduled 30 minutes ago. I ignored it, unable to look away from the boy's face. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, though some part of me already knew, or feared, the answer. The store around us continued its quiet business, oblivious to the earthquake happening in the corner by the business bestsellers. The boy didn't answer at first. He simply held my gaze with a steadiness that felt impossible for his age. Then, with deliberate movements, he reached into the inside pocket of his navy blue hoodie and pulled out a worn envelope, creased from countless foldings and unfoldings. He held it out to me, and I saw that his hand trembled slightly, the first sign of emotion he'd shown. It was the handwriting that hit me first. Messy, slanted to the right, with the distinctive loop on the capital letters that I'd worked to correct over the years because it looked unprofessional. My handwriting, from a time before styluses and keyboards had made it nearly obsolete. I took the envelope with fingers that didn't feel like my own and read the name written on the front. To Michael, when he's old enough to understand. Michael, my son. My heart stopped. The world narrowed to the envelope in my hand, and the boy, Michael, watching me with unwavering attention. I stared at him, confused, searching his face for meaning, for memory, for anything that would make sense of this moment. And then I saw it, the eyes. My eyes. The same shade of steel blue that venture capitalists claimed made me look like I could see through markets and men alike. My mother's eyes, passed down to me, and now to this boy. The color was unmistakable, even under the bookstore's mediocre lighting. I don't understand, I whispered, though I did. How did you find me? He glanced around the bookstore, his composure remarkable. You're not exactly hiding, he said simply. Your picture's on the window. There was no accusation in his voice, just a statement of fact. I nodded, still unable to process what was happening. My PR team had pushed for the nationwide book tour, arranged the interviews, organized the signings. My face had been plastered across business magazines, morning shows, and social media for weeks. I'd been hiding in plain sight, visible to everyone, including the one person I never expected to come looking. Does your mother know you're here? I asked, my mind racing. Sarah. It had to be Sarah. The timing fit. The eyes fit. Everything about this child spoke of the woman I'd left behind in Seattle when my first startup began taking off. The woman who'd told me, barely a month after I ended things, that she was pregnant. The woman I'd silently sent money to for years, through a lawyer who ensured I never had to speak to her directly. Michael nodded. Mom drove me. She's outside in the car. He fidgeted with the sleeve of his hoodie. She said it was my choice whether to talk to you or not. I glanced toward the bookstore's entrance, suddenly aware that Sarah, the woman I'd once thought I might marry before ambition rewrote my plans, was sitting in a car probably less than 50 feet away. The thought made me dizzy. She kept the letter, I said stupidly, still holding the envelope. All this time, something shifted in Michael's expression. She kept everything, he said. The letter, the checks, the articles about you. She said I should know where I came from, even if you didn't want to be there. Each word hit like a physical blow. I'd convinced myself over the years that my financial support was enough, more than enough. That sending money absolved me of the harder parts of parenthood. The checks had started small, back when ramen noodles were a staple of my diet. They grew as my company did, becoming substantial after our IPO. But I'd never written a note with them, never asked for photos, never acknowledged birthdays or Christmas or first days of school. Would you? I cleared my throat, searching for words. Would you like to sit down somewhere? Talk properly. Michael considered this, then nodded. He stood up, tucking my book, my sanitized, carefully edited version of my life, under his arm. He was tall for his age, lanky in a way that reminded me of myself before expensive tailors and personal trainers had reshaped my appearance. I led him to the bookstore cafe, ordering hot chocolate for him and black coffee for myself. My hand shook as I paid, my usual confidence deserting me entirely. We sat at a small table in the corner, away from the few other customers. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the hiss of the espresso machine and the quiet ambient music. I don't know what to say, I admitted finally, watching him wrap his small hands around the mug. I never thought I'd meet you. Why not? He asked, direct as always. You knew I existed. I swallowed hard. How could I explain to a 10-year-old the choices of a scared, selfish 24-year-old? The terror I'd felt when Sarah told me she was keeping the baby. The way I'd convinced myself that a clean break was kinder than a half-present father. I was afraid. I said finally, the admission painful. I didn't think I'd be a good father. I was working all the time, trying to build something. I thought you'd be better off without me." Michael took a sip of his hot chocolate, leaving a small foam mustache that he wiped away with the back of his hand. The gesture was so childlike, so at odds with his serious demeanor, that something twisted painfully in my chest. "Did you ever regret it?" he asked. The question hung in the air between us. I'd spent years burying that part of my life, focusing on the next deal, the next product launch, the next round of funding. Success had been my justification, my penance, my distraction. "Yes," I said quietly. "More than you know." He nodded, as if this was the answer he'd expected. "The letter says you'd come back when you built something worth leaving me. Did you build it?" I looked around the bookstore that bore my company's name, thought of the gleaming headquarters in San Francisco, the vacation homes I rarely visited, the investments spread across continents. All the trappings of success that had seemed so important, so validating. "I thought I had," I said. "But sitting here now, I'm not sure anymore." Michael reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, a modest model, several generations old. He tapped the screen a few times, then slid it across the table to me. A photo filled the display, a woman with chestnut hair streaked with early gray, her arm around Michael's shoulders. They stood in front of a small house with a red door. Both were smiling. Sarah, older, different, but unmistakably her. The same warm eyes, the same slight dimple in her right cheek. She looked tired in a way she hadn't when I knew her, but there was a contentment in her smile that pulled at memories I'd locked away. "That's our house," Michael said. "Mom's a teacher now, English literature at Ballard High School." I nodded, unable to speak. Sarah had been studying literature when we met, dreaming of teaching. She'd put her degree on hold when I convinced her to move in with me, when my first company was taking all my time and energy. I'd forgotten that dream of hers, if I'd ever properly known it. "She never married?" I asked carefully. Michael shook his head. "There was someone a few years ago. Dave. He was okay, but it didn't work out." He hesitated, then added, "She said it was hard for guys to understand that we came as a package deal." The implication hung between us. Sarah had prioritized their son while I had chosen a different path altogether. The contrast made me deeply uncomfortable. "Michael," I began, not sure what I was going to say. An apology? A promise? Some explanation that would make sense of my absence? But he cut me off gently. "You don't have to say anything right now," he said, with a maturity that startled me. "I just wanted to meet you, to see if you were like I imagined." "And am I?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. He studied me, his head tilted slightly. Those familiar eyes, my eyes, regarded me with an unnerving perception. "You're shorter," he said finally, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "And you look more worried." Despite everything, I found myself laughing, a short, surprised sound. "Fair assessment," I admitted. "I've had a lot to worry about." "Like what?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. It was such a simple question, but it stopped me cold. What had I been worrying about? Stock prices, board meetings, competitor analysis, acquisition targets. The details that filled my days suddenly seemed hollow in the face of this child I'd never known. "Nothing that matters right now," I said quietly. The envelope felt heavy in my hand, heavier than paper had any right to be. We'd moved to a bench outside the bookstore, the evening air crisp with early autumn. Downtown Seattle bustled around us. People heading home from work, couples meeting for dinner, tourists taking photos of the waterfront in the distance. Normal life continuing while mine tilted on its axis. Michael sat beside me, leaving careful space between us. He didn't pressure me to open the letter. He simply waited, his sneakered feet swinging slightly, not quite reaching the ground. "I wrote this a long time ago," I said, turning the envelope over in my hands. The paper had yellowed slightly at the edges. "I'm not sure I remember what it says." "I know what it says," Michael replied. "I've read it a lot." Of course he had. I tried to imagine him growing up with this letter, these words I'd hastily written as my final act of fatherhood. What age had he been when Sarah first showed it to him? When had he become old enough to understand? 6? 7? How many questions had it raised that no one could answer? With trembling fingers, I unsealed the envelope and pulled out the single sheet of paper folded inside. The stationery was from the first hotel my startup had put me up in, the Edgewater, where I'd stayed for nearly a month during our initial funding round. The heading was still visible at the top, though the letter had been folded and unfolded so many times the creases had begun to tear. The past surged forward like a tidal wave as I recognized my own handwriting, messy and rushed. Sarah, I know you think I'm making a mistake. Maybe I am, but I can't be a father right now. I can barely keep this company alive, and if I don't give it everything I have, it's going to fail. I can't divide myself between two worlds. It wouldn't be fair to the child. I've arranged for money to be sent monthly. My lawyer will handle it. It should be enough for whatever you both need. If it isn't, let him know. I'm sorry I couldn't be the father he needed. Maybe one day, when I've built something worth leaving him, you'll understand why I had to make this choice. Maybe he will too. Keep this letter for him. When he's old enough to ask about me, let him read it. Tell him I didn't leave because of him. I left because of me. James, no love. No real goodbye. Just cold, practical arrangements and hollow justifications. I remembered writing it in the hotel room. The Seattle rain lashing against the windows, a half-empty bottle of whiskey on the desk. I'd been terrified. Of fatherhood. Of failure. Of being trapped in a life I hadn't planned. I looked up to find Michael watching me, his expression unreadable. The words on the page hit differently now, sitting across from the consequence of my decision. They sounded like excuses, thin and self-serving. I was 24 when I wrote this, I said, as if that explained anything. I had no idea what I was doing. How old are you now? Michael asked. 35. He nodded, considering this. That's not that old. A surprised laugh escaped me. No, I guess it's not. Though most days I felt ancient, worn down by the relentless pace of the tech world. Do you still have your company? He asked. Yes. It's bigger now. An understatement. Harrington Technologies had grown from a desperate gamble with 3 employees to a publicly traded corporation with offices on 3 continents. We make software that helps other businesses manage their data. Michael nodded politely, though I could tell the details didn't interest him much. What 10-year-old would care about enterprise software solutions? Is that what you wanted to build? He asked. In the letter, you said you wanted to build something worth leaving me. The question caught me off guard. I stared at the letter in my hand, at the ambitious, frightened young man who'd written those words. Had I built what I'd set out to build? The company was successful beyond my wildest dreams. I had more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. But looking at Michael, I realized I had built everything, except a place for him in it. I thought it was, I said honestly, but I think I lost sight of what I meant when I wrote that. A silver sedan pulled into a loading zone about 20 yards away. The driver's window rolled down, and I caught a glimpse of a woman with chestnut hair. She didn't get out or wave, just watch from a distance. Sarah. My throat tightened. That's Mom, Michael confirmed, following my gaze. She's probably wondering if everything's okay. I folded the letter carefully, returning it to its envelope. How would you feel about me talking to her? Just for a minute. Michael considered this, then shrugged. It's okay with me, but she might not want to. I understand. And I did. After everything, Sarah had every right to never speak to me again. The fact that she'd brought Michael here at all showed more grace than I deserved. I didn't know you'd read this, I said, handing the letter back to him. He took it, folding it again with great care, a practiced motion. I'm sorry it wasn't more. He nodded, placing the envelope back inside his hoodie pocket. Mom kept it. She told me to give it to you if I ever found you. Then, after a beat, now I have. The simple statement held a sense of completion, as if he'd fulfilled some mission. I wondered what he'd expected from this meeting. Tears? Dramatic reconciliation? Or exactly this, the awkward, halting conversation of 2 strangers connected by blood but separated by choice? I want you to know, I began carefully, that nothing in my life turned out the way I expected. The company grew faster than I thought possible. There were opportunities one couldn't turn down, responsibilities I couldn't walk away from. I paused, aware I was still making excuses. But that doesn't change the fact that I made a choice. A choice that hurt you and your mother. Michael didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just sat there with a strange strength in his silence, absorbing my words. I wanted to say something profound, something that would fix the damage of a decade of absence. But no magic words existed for this situation. Did you ever think about coming back? He asked finally. The question was simple, but cut to the heart of everything. Yes, I admitted, especially early on. But the longer I stayed away, the harder it seemed. Each milestone I missed made the next one more impossible to face. I swallowed hard. And then success became its own kind of prison. The more I achieved, the more I had to justify why I'd given up everything else. Michael nodded, processing this. Mom said you might say that. She knows me well, I said quietly. Or knew me, once. We sat in silence for a moment, watching the city move around us. I stole glances at him, trying to memorize his features, the shape of his face, the slight cowlick at his crown, the way his eyebrows drew together when he was thinking. I'd missed 10 years of these details. I have your book, he said suddenly, patting his backpack. You can have it back if you want. Keep it, I said, though it's probably boring for someone your age. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Parts of it are, but I like the part about how you built your first computer when you were 12. I'm building one too. Pride flickered across his face. Mom says I'm good with technology. Like you. The casual comparison, like you, hit me with unexpected force. This child had inherited more than my eyes. He'd inherited aptitudes, interests, perhaps even temperament, all developing without my knowledge or guidance. I'd like to see it sometime, I said cautiously. Your computer build. Michael studied me for a long moment, as if assessing my sincerity. Maybe, he said finally, if Mom says it's okay. The silver sedan's headlights flashed twice, a signal. Michael straightened, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. I have to go. It's still a school night. Of course. I stood awkwardly, unsure of the protocol. Should I hug him? Shake his hand? Both seemed wrong. One too familiar, one too formal. In the end, Michael made the decision, extending his hand with solemn formality. I shook it, marveling at how small it felt in mine. Thank you, I said, for finding me. He nodded once, then turned to go. After a few steps, he paused and looked back. Mom's phone number is still the same, he said. If you want to call. Then he was walking away, his sneakers scuffing against the pavement, his hoodie billowing slightly in the evening breeze. I watched him climb into the car, saw Sarah's silhouette turn toward him in conversation. The sedan's engine started, and they pulled away into the Seattle traffic, disappearing around a corner. I stood there long after they'd gone, the weight of the missing years pressing down on me like a physical thing. The letter had asked for understanding. Standing alone on the sidewalk, I realized I was the one who had never truly understood what I'd given up. I didn't call Sarah that night, or the next. I spent 3 days in my suite at the Four Seasons, canceling interviews and appearances, much to my publicist's dismay. I told her I had food poisoning. In reality, I was paralyzed by indecision, staring at my phone for hours, composing messages I never sent. What could I possibly say after 10 years of silence? Sorry I missed your childhood. Want to grab lunch? There was no guidebook for this, no business strategy to fall back on. I'd navigated billion-dollar deals with less anxiety than I felt about texting my ex. On the 4th day, I forced myself to do it. 3 simple words. Can we talk? Her response came 6 hours later. Pike Place. Victor Steinbrook Park. Tomorrow. 4 p.m. The next day, I arrived early, sitting on a bench overlooking Elliott Bay. The fall air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of salt water and the distant calls of ferry horns. Seattle had changed in the decades since I'd lived here. More high-rises, more tech campuses, more traffic, but Pike Place remained essentially the same. Bustling, chaotic, authentic. I dressed down deliberately in jeans and a plain sweater, no designer labels, nothing that screamed money or success. I didn't want this to look like I was trying to impress her. But as I waited, nervously watching every woman who passed, I wondered if anything about my appearance mattered at all. I spotted her before she saw me. Sarah approached from the market side, wrapped in a green wool coat, her chestnut hair loose around her shoulders. She walked with purpose, the way she always had, her chin slightly lifted. No Michael today. This was between us. Sarah. I stood as she reached me, her name feeling both foreign and achingly familiar on my tongue. James. She didn't smile or extend her hand. She simply sat on the bench, leaving space between us, and looked out at the water. You look well. So do you, I said, meaning it. Time had been kind to her. There were fine lines around her eyes now, a certain weariness in her posture, but she was still beautiful in the quiet, understated way that had first drawn me to her at that tech mixer nearly 12 years ago. Michael told me about your meeting, she said, getting straight to the point. He said he gave you the letter. I nodded, settling back onto the bench. I didn't expect to ever see it again. Or him. That makes 2 of us. A touch of bitterness edged her voice. For years I thought you might change your mind. Come back. Try to be part of his life. She turned to look at me directly. Then I saw your first big magazine cover. You looked so complete. Like your life was exactly what you wanted it to be. The memory stung. Forbes, 5 years ago. The next tech titan, they'd called me, photographed in front of floor-to-ceiling windows in our San Francisco headquarters. I'd been proud of that cover, had it framed in my office. It wasn't, I admitted. Complete, I mean. I just got very good at pretending. We walked together down the waterfront, the conversation shifting like the tide, sometimes flowing easily, sometimes ebbing into uncomfortable silences. She told me about her teaching career, the small house in Ballard she'd bought with help from her parents, Michael's elementary school where he excelled in science and struggled with spelling. Normal life, rendered extraordinary by its complete separation from mine. Why did you keep the letter? I asked as we passed street musicians playing jazz beneath the market's neon sign. You could have thrown it away. Told him whatever story you wanted about me. Sarah paused, watching the saxophonist finish his solo before answering. I considered it, especially in those first few years. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. But I decided Michael deserved the truth. Even an uncomfortable truth is better than a comforting lie. The words hit home. My entire public persona had been built on comfortable lies. The self-made man narrative, the focused visionary who sacrificed for success. The sanitized version of my life contained in my autobiography. What did you tell him about me? Before he read the letter? That you were smart, ambitious, that you weren't ready to be a father. She shrugged. I never made you a villain, James. I didn't have to. The implication hung between us. My actions had spoken for themselves. We found a quiet cafe near the original Starbucks, ordering coffee to ward off the chill. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, gathering my courage. I want to ask you something, I said carefully. And I need you to be honest with me. Sarah nodded, her expression guarded. Is it too late? The question emerged barely above a whisper. To be part of his life, somehow? She didn't answer immediately. She stirred her coffee slowly, methodically, the spoon making soft circles against ceramic. That depends, she said finally, on what you're offering and why. If this is guilt or curiosity or some midlife crisis, then yes, it's too late. Michael deserves better than that. And if it's not, her eyes met mine, searching, then you need to understand something. I won't let you hurt him again. If you want to be in his life, it has to be consistently, reliably. You can't just appear when it's convenient and disappear when it's hard. I thought about my schedule, the international flights, the weeks spent in conference rooms and development labs, the constant demands of the company I'd built. Consistency had never been my strong suit outside of work. I don't know if I can give him what he deserves, I admitted, but I want to try. Sarah nodded, a weariness settling over her features. That's more honest than I expected. I'm trying something new, I said with a weak smile. Honesty. The air between us shifted, something unspoken passing between us. Not forgiveness. It was too soon for that, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Tell me the truth, she said suddenly. Behind the myth you've built, the empire, was it worth it? The question clawed at my throat. I'd asked myself the same thing countless times over the years, always burying the answer beneath new acquisitions, product launches, and stock prices. But sitting across from the woman I'd once thought I'd spend my life with, the mother of the child I'd abandoned, pretense felt impossible. Parts of it, I said finally. The creation, building something from nothing, solving problems. That was worth it. I traced the rim of my coffee cup with my finger. But the cost was higher than I calculated. And some days, most days lately, the balance sheet doesn't make sense anymore. Sarah studied me, her head tilted slightly. You always did talk in business metaphors. I laughed, surprised by the observation. Did I? Even back then. Yes. It was charming at first. Then irritating. A small smile played at the corner of her mouth. Michael does it too sometimes. Compares everything to computer systems. The mention of our son, brought us back to the purpose of this meeting. I'd like to see him again, I said. If he wants to. Maybe just start small. Get to know each other. Sarah nodded slowly. I'll talk to him. It's his decision. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But James, you need to be certain. He's not a business venture you can divest from if it gets complicated. I know. And I did. For perhaps the first time, I truly understood what I was asking for. Not absolution or a quick fix, but the beginning of a relationship that would require work, patience, and sacrifice. We parted with tentative plans. No promises, no commitments yet, just an agreement to keep the door open. As I watched her walk away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, hope mixed with absolute terror. The exact same feeling I'd had when launching my first company, when everything was at stake and nothing was certain. That night, I canceled the remainder of my book tour. My publicist was horrified, my publisher threatened legal action, but I held firm. I rented a furnished apartment in Seattle, not downtown near my usual hotels, but in Fremont, a quirky neighborhood north of the city center. I told my executive team I'd be working remotely for the foreseeable future. Some emergency, I explained vaguely. Family matters. Family. The word felt foreign on my tongue, a language I'd forgotten how to speak. But as I stood in the empty apartment overlooking the canal, I realized I was ready to learn it again. Our first planned meeting was at Gasworks Park, neutral territory with space to walk and talk without the pressure of sitting face to face. Michael chose it, according to Sarah's text. I arrived 20 minutes early, pacing nervously along the waterfront path, watching seaplanes take off and land on Lake Union. When they appeared at the top of the hill, I barely recognized them. In my mind, they'd remained frozen as they were at our last meeting. Sarah in her green coat, Michael in his navy hoodie. But today Sarah wore jeans and a red sweater, her hair pulled back, and Michael had on a Seattle Seahawks jersey over a long-sleeved shirt. They looked like any mother and son enjoying a Saturday in the park, not characters in the drama of my life. Sarah waved but stayed back, finding a bench with a book while Michael approached alone. Another test, I realized. Seeing if I could handle one-on-one time with a 10-year-old. "Hi," I said, suddenly awkward. All my prepared conversation starters vanished. "Hi," he replied, kicking at a tuft of grass. "Mom said you're staying in Seattle for a while." "That's right. I rented an apartment in Fremont. That's close to us." His tone was neutral, impossible to read. "It is. I thought it might make it easier to see each other. If you want." Michael nodded, still not looking directly at me. "I'm building that computer I told you about. I got the motherboard installed yesterday." I seized on the topic with relief. "That's great. What specs are you using?" And just like that, we found our footing. He described his build in detail, the components he'd saved for, the YouTube tutorials he'd followed, the adjustments he'd made to the case to improve airflow. His knowledge was impressive for his age, his enthusiasm infectious. I found myself genuinely engaged, offering suggestions, asking questions that weren't just for show. We walked along the park's paths, past the rusted industrial structures that gave the place its name. The conversation flowed more easily than I'd expected, moving from computers to school to movies he liked. Normal things. Dad things. The thought sent a jolt through me. I wasn't his dad, not really. Just a biological connection and a handful of shared interests. "Mom says you run a big company," he said as we reached the Kite Hill. A dozen colorful shapes danced in the wind above us, controlled by families scattered across the grass. "I do," I replied, wondering how to explain enterprise software architecture to a 10-year-old. "We make specialized tools that help other businesses organize their information." Michael considered this. "Is it boring?" The question startled a laugh out of me. "Sometimes, yes. A lot of meetings. A lot of paperwork. But the problem-solving part, figuring out what people need and how to build it, that's never boring." "Do you have to wear a suit every day?" "Not anymore," I smiled. "When you're the boss, you get to make the dress code." He nodded, processing this information. "Why did you cancel your book tour?" The directness caught me off guard. "How did you know about that?" He shrugged. "Mom Googled you. She said you were supposed to be in New York and Chicago this week." Of course she had. Sarah had always been thorough in her research, even back in college. It was one of the things I'd admired about her. "I canceled it because I wanted to be here," I said simply. "To see if we could get to know each other." Michael looked at me properly then, his expression serious. "Are you going to leave again?" The question cut straight to the heart of everything. No child should have to ask that of a parent, yet here we were. I crouched down, meeting him at eye level, gravel crunching beneath my shoes. "I don't want to," I said honestly. "But I can't promise I'll never have to travel for work. What I can promise is that I'll always come back, and I'll always stay in touch. If you want me to." He studied me with those familiar blue eyes, searching for truth, or lies? Finally, he nodded once, a solemn acceptance of terms. Want to see the kites? He asked, changing the subject with the adaptability of childhood. I'd like that. As we climbed the hill, I glanced back at Sarah. She was watching us, her book forgotten in her lap. I raised a hand in acknowledgement, and after a moment's hesitation, she returned the gesture. Small steps. Broken ground. Over the following weeks, we met again and again. Walks in Discovery Park. Afternoons at the Pacific Science Center. Games of chess at a cafe near their house that he always won. His strategic mind outmaneuvering mine despite my years of business negotiations. Each meeting became a little less awkward, a little more natural. I learned his schedule, soccer practice on Tuesdays, coding club on Thursdays. I learned his preferences. He hated bell peppers, but loved spicy food. He read science fiction voraciously. He could talk for hours about space exploration. Slowly, carefully, we stitched together something fragile and real. I told him stories I never put in the book, failures, humiliations, nights I almost gave up. The honest version of success, not the sanitized one. He seemed to appreciate the truth, especially the parts where I'd messed up and had to find my way back. He laughed once, during one of these stories, a sudden, unguarded sound I hadn't realized I was waiting for. The moment felt like a gift, precious and unexpected. Sarah and I developed a cautious coexistence. Sometimes she stayed for our visits, turning them into casual family outings. Other times she used the hours to run errands or meet friends, giving us space to develop our own relationship. We talked more frequently, exchanging text messages about Michael's activities or preferences. Always practical, always focused on our son. One evening in late October, after I dropped Michael off following a trip to the Museum of Flight, Sarah invited me in for coffee. It was the first time I'd been inside their home. A modest craftsman with creaking floors and warm yellow walls covered in Michael's artwork and school certificates. He's changed since you've been around, she said, handing me a mug at the kitchen counter. More talkative, more confident. Really, I hadn't noticed a dramatic difference, but then I had no baseline to compare to. She nodded, leaning against the refrigerator covered in school schedules and reminder notes. He used to be so serious all the time, like he was carrying something heavy. She met my eyes directly. I think it was questions. About you. About why you left. Now that he has some answers, he seems lighter. The observation settled uncomfortably. I hadn't considered how my absence might have shaped his personality, created a weight he'd carried his entire young life. I'm not sure I've given him good answers, I admitted. I'm still figuring them out myself. Sarah's expression softened slightly. But you're trying. That counts for something. I looked around the kitchen. Lived in, practical, nothing fancy but clearly a home. So different from my minimalist penthouse in San Francisco or the sterile corporate apartment I'd rented here. This house held history, memories, the accumulated debris of a shared life. I've made so many mistakes, I said quietly. I don't know how to fix them. You don't, she replied simply. You just make different choices going forward. I met Sarah for coffee again the following week, without Michael, and then again a few days later. We talked about her teaching career, my company, mutual acquaintances we'd lost touch with. We carefully avoided reminiscing about our relationship or discussing what might have been. Those paths were closed. But something else was opening. Not romance or reconciliation, but a partnership of sorts. Co-parents, if I dared use the term. I met someone, she told me during one of these coffee meetings. A history teacher at my school. Tom. It's new, but good. She watched me carefully, gauging my reaction. I'm glad, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Does Michael know? Yes. They've met a few times. Tom coaches the debate team, so they already had a connection. She hesitated. I wanted you to know. Thank you for telling me. I turned my coffee cup in its saucer. I hope he makes you both happy. She studied me, head tilted. You know, I spent years being angry with you, James. For leaving. For the checks without notes. For the silence. She sighed. But I'm not angry anymore. Just sorry that you missed so much. The words struck deeper than recrimination would have. Pity was harder to bear than anger. Me too, I said softly. November arrived with persistent rain and earlier darkness. My weekly video conferences with the executive team became tense as they questioned my extended absence. Projects needed decisions. Competitors were making moves. Investors were asking questions. My CFO reminded me pointedly that the company didn't run itself. I knew I'd need to return to San Francisco eventually. The life I'd built couldn't remain on autopilot forever. But the thought of leaving Seattle, leaving Michael, filled me with dread. Would this fragile new relationship survive distance? Would he see my departure as another abandonment? One rain-soaked Saturday, I picked him up for our weekly chess match. He was quieter than usual, his moves distracted and uncharacteristically sloppy. "Everything okay?" I asked as I captured his bishop, a mistake he never would have made normally. He shrugged, staring at the board. "Mom says you have to go back to California soon." So Sarah had prepared him. Of course she had. She was a far better parent than I'd ever be. "My company needs me there." "Yes," I said carefully, "but I'll come back to Seattle often. And we can video chat, text, email, whatever you want." He nodded, not meeting my eyes. "It's fine. I know you're busy." The familiar words, the same justification I'd used for a decade of absence, stung coming from his mouth. "Michael," I said gently, "look at me." He raised his eyes reluctantly. "This isn't like before. I'm not disappearing from your life again. I promise." "Okay," he said, but I could see the doubt in his expression. "What if you came to visit me?" I suggested suddenly. "In San Francisco, during winter break. You and your mom, if she wants to come. I could show you the company, take you to some of the tech museums there." Interest flickered across his face. "Really? Could I see where you work?" "Absolutely. The whole place. I'll even let you test some of our new products before they're released." The hint of a smile appeared. "That would be cool. Then it's a plan." I moved a pawn forward. "Your move." As we resumed our game, the rain tapping against the cafe windows, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't just making promises anymore. I was making plans. Concrete, specific plans that would require effort and commitment to fulfill. Michael never called me Dad. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But when he smiled at me across the chessboard after executing a perfect checkmate and said, "You should write a new chapter," I knew what he meant. This one wasn't about ambition. It wasn't about success or failure or corporate strategy. It was about redemption. And it was only just beginning. December in San Francisco felt wrong. The mild weather, the Christmas decorations on palm trees, the absence of Seattle's brooding gray skies. All of it reinforced the distance between my two lives. I'd been back for 3 weeks, thrown immediately into crisis management and strategic planning for the coming year. The company had suffered without my direct oversight. Decisions had been delayed, opportunities missed. My executive team was relieved to have me back, though no one directly questioned my mysterious family emergency. I worked longer hours than ever, making up for lost time, while maintaining my promise to Michael. We video chatted 3 times a week, awkward at first, with both of us unsure what to say without the buffer of activities to structure our interactions. But we found our rhythm eventually. He showed me his completed computer build through the camera. I gave him virtual tours of different parts of the company headquarters. We even played chess online, though the experience lacked the tangible satisfaction of moving physical pieces. 2 weeks before Christmas, my phone rang during a budget meeting. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. She never called during work hours. Our communications were carefully scheduled around my availability. "Excuse me," I said, already standing. "I need to take this." I stepped into the hallway, concern tightening my chest. "Sarah, is everything okay?" "It's fine," she assured me quickly. "Michael's fine. She paused. "I wanted to finalize our travel plans for the visit." Relief washed over me. "Of course. Have you booked flights yet? I can arrange for a car to meet you at the airport. Actually, that's why I'm calling. Michael's really excited about the trip, but..." She hesitated. "Tom invited us to spend Christmas with his family in Portland. It would be Michael's first time meeting them, and..." "Say no more," I interrupted, ignoring the disappointment settling in my stomach. "Family Christmas is important. We can reschedule for spring break or summer." "That's just it," Sarah continued. "Michael doesn't want to reschedule. He suggested that he could come alone to San Francisco, just for 3 days, right after Christmas." The proposal took me completely by surprise. "Alone? Are you comfortable with that?" "He's flown as an unaccompanied minor before, to visit my parents in Phoenix," she explained. "And he made a pretty convincing case. Said he's old enough for guys-only time." The phrase guys only sent an unexpected warmth through me. "If you're sure, I'd love to have him." I'll make it special. I know you will, she said softly. He trusts you, James. We both do. Don't make us regret it. The warning was gentle but clear. This was a test, the biggest one yet. I won't, I promised. Thank you for trusting me with this. After we hung up, I stood in the hallway of my company, surrounded by the empire I'd built, feeling strangely hollow. The budget meeting continued without me, executives debating marketing allocations and development resources. Once, these decisions had felt like life and death. Now they seemed distant, abstract. I returned to the conference room with renewed focus. I need the week after Christmas off, I announced. My son is coming to visit. My son. The words felt foreign on my tongue, but right. Several executives exchanged surprised glances. In 10 years, I'd never mentioned having a child. My CFO raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. My personal life had always been off limits for discussion. Now I was deliberately bringing it into the open. I threw myself into preparation for Michael's visit with the same intensity one usually reserved for product launches. I rearranged my penthouse, transforming my minimalist guest room into something a 10-year-old might actually enjoy. I researched activities, made reservations, mapped out 3 days of experiences that would balance tech attractions with normal tourist fun. When Michael stepped off the plane in San Francisco International, a yellow unaccompanied minor badge around his neck, I barely recognized him. In just a month, he seemed to have grown an inch, his face a little less round, his manner a little more confident. He scanned the waiting area, spotted me, and smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes. "Hey," he said as he reached me, accepting a brief, awkward hug. "Hey yourself," I replied, taking his backpack. "Good flight." The lady next to me snored. He confided as we walked toward baggage claim. Really loud. Like this. He demonstrated with an exaggerated nasal rumble that made me laugh. And just like that, the distance of the past month dissolved. He chattered about school, about Christmas presents, about a science project he was planning. I listened, marveling at how easily he adapted to new situations, how resilient he was despite everything. The 3 days passed in a blur. We toured tech museums and rode cable cars. I showed him the company headquarters on a day when most employees were on holiday break, letting him explore the development labs and test prototype software. He sat in my chair in the executive boardroom, spinning in circles and declaring it pretty cool but kind of boring. I couldn't disagree. On his final evening, we ordered pizza and ate it on the floor of my living room, the San Francisco skyline glittering through floor-to-ceiling windows. Michael had grown quieter throughout the day, and I knew he was thinking about leaving tomorrow. "I had a good time," he said suddenly, putting down his pizza crust. "Better than I thought I would." "Me too," I admitted. "Turns out you're pretty good company." He smiled, then grew serious again. "When are you coming back to Seattle?" 2 weeks, I promised. January 15th. I've already booked the flight." He nodded, satisfied with the concrete date. "I told Mom I want to keep seeing you, even if she starts spending more time with Tom." The simple declaration touched me deeply. I want that too. My friend Aiden's parents are divorced, he continued matter-of-factly. He sees his dad every other weekend. I told him my situation is kind of the same, except you live farther away. "Is that how you think of it?" I asked carefully. "Like divorced parents?" He shrugged. "I guess. Except you and Mom were never married. And you didn't know me before." He considered this. "It's complicated." "Very complicated," I agreed, amazed at his ability to summarize our tangled situation so neatly. "I read your book," he said, changing subjects with the quicksilver attention shift of childhood. "The whole thing, not just the parts about computers." "The whole thing? Impressive. Most adults haven't managed that." He grinned. "Some parts were boring, but I liked learning about how you started. Mom says I got my stubbornness from you." "Your mother might be right about that," I laughed. "But you left stuff out," he continued, suddenly serious again. "Important stuff." I nodded, unable to deny it. "I did. When I wrote it, I thought those parts of my life were separate, private. I didn't think they mattered to the story I was telling." "But they do matter," he insisted. "You can't just leave out parts of your life because they're hard to talk about." Out of the mouths of babes. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm learning that." 6 months after our first meeting in the bookstore, my publisher contacted me about a second edition of From Nothing to Empire. The first printing had sold out, and they wanted to capitalize on the momentum with an updated version. Perhaps with a new afterword reflecting on the book's success? I proposed something different, an entirely new final chapter. My editor was skeptical until she read the draft I sent over. "This is unexpected," she said during our call, "but powerful. Are you sure you want to go this personal?" "I'm sure," I replied. "It's time." The new edition was released in early summer. It had a new final chapter, titled simply, "The Boy in the Bookstore." It didn't name Michael. It didn't describe Sarah or the letter that had shattered my carefully constructed narrative. It didn't include the raw details of our reconciliation. Those parts remained private, protected from public consumption. Instead, it told a more universal truth, that success is hollow when built on abandoned responsibilities. That redemption begins with acknowledging the damage you've caused. That no empire matters if the cost is your own blood. The media, predictably, buzzed about the edition. Some called it my most vulnerable writing. Others questioned its authenticity, suggesting it was a calculated move to humanize my image. A few business commentators criticized me for detracting from the book's entrepreneurial message with sentimental family drama. I didn't care. Michael read it first, before publication. I sent him the manuscript during one of my monthly visits to Seattle, watching nervously as he took it to his room. He emerged an hour later, handed it back to me with a small nod, and said, "This time, you didn't forget anything." The simple approval meant more than any review or sales figure ever could. My life changed in ways both subtle and profound. I spent 1 week each month in Seattle, working remotely, building a presence in Michael's life. I rented a more permanent apartment there, accumulated my own small collection of his artwork and school projects. I attended his science fair, his soccer tournament, his elementary school graduation. Not as a full-time father. That role wasn't mine to claim, but as a consistent, reliable presence. Sarah and Tom got engaged in April. Michael told me over video chat, matter-of-factly, as if testing my reaction. I congratulated them sincerely, recognizing that Tom had earned his place in their family through years of presence while I was absent. There was no jealousy, only gratitude that Michael had a good man in his daily life. My monthly visits continued unchanged. Sarah made sure of that, coordinating schedules so I never felt excluded. My company shifted too. I delegated more, trusted my team to handle routine operations without my constant oversight. I hired a president to manage day-to-day affairs, focusing my own energy on vision and strategy, and on having enough flexibility to maintain my promises to Michael. Some investors grumbled about my reduced role, but the company continued to thrive. Perhaps because I'd finally found the balance I'd always claimed was impossible. In September, almost a year after our first meeting, Michael called me directly for the first time. Not during our scheduled video chats, but on a random Tuesday evening. "Hey," he said when I answered, his voice casual. "I got the highest score in my class on the math placement test. Mom said I should tell you." "That's fantastic," I replied, beaming in my empty San Francisco kitchen. "Congratulations. We should celebrate when I'm there next week." "Yeah," he agreed. "I thought maybe we could go to that pizza place again, the one with the weird toppings." "Absolutely. It's a date." There was a pause, and I thought the conversation was over. But then he added, "I told my teacher that my dad is good at math too, that it runs in the family." My dad. The words hung in the air between us. 3,000 miles and a decade of absence suddenly compressed into nothing. "It definitely does," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the emotion welling in my throat. "Must be in the genes." "Probably," he agreed casually, unaware of the seismic shift he'd just caused. "Anyway, I gotta go. Mom says dinner's ready." "Okay. Thanks for calling, Michael. I'm really proud of you." "Thanks," he said. "Bye, Dad." Dad. One simple word that I'd never expected to hear from his lips. One word that changed everything. After we hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing. The empire I'd built surrounded me, the luxury penthouse, the view of the bay, the trappings of success I'd sacrificed everything for. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a fortress protecting me from failure. It felt like what it was, just stuff. Meaningless without connection. Hollow without love. We still have a long road ahead of us, Michael and I. One phone call doesn't erase a decade of absence. 1 year doesn't build a complete relationship. Trust grows slowly, especially when it's been broken before. I know that, but every story has to start somewhere. And ours, this unexpected, painful, beautiful story started in a bookstore with a boy brave enough to confront the father who'd forgotten him, and a man who, against all odds, was given the chance to remember who he used to be and who he still had a chance to become.